Welcome to the podcast where mental health is at the core of what we focus on. We strive to develop people like you to maximize who you are and what you've been called to do by sharing tools and resources for better brain health. And now here's your host, Juan Garcia.
Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast where we focus on your mental health and peak performance. We are in the middle of a series that we just started. We have one episode up. This is the second episode on this series about rejection. It is also focusing on excerpts from my latest book, The Discarded: Overcoming Rejection. In the book, I talk about the psychology behind rejection, why we struggle with it, how can we overcome it. We also tackle things like guilt trips. We talk about overcoming a victim mindset. So I double dare you to get a copy, get it as a gift for a friend, for a family member. I think it's a really good topic to talk about. I share some of my specific personal issues with the topic of rejection, and if you have followed our temperament series, you know that there are certain temperaments that struggle more with rejection than others. So this all kind of collides, if you will, in this way that this is my focus. Part of what I love to do is to help people navigate these difficult issues in life, and so I decided to write about it, and you'll see the link of the book and where to get it in the description box. So please support us in that way. It would be much appreciated. So in this specific episode, I want to talk about this topic under the rejection umbrella and what it is to confront the pain of rejection. So we'll call it the pain of rejection. And first of all, how do we identify it? And secondly, what are some ways that we can actually confront it and overcome it? Because when people struggle with rejection, it's deeply rooted. And based on your temperament, whether you are an extrovert or an introvert, and I know that some are ambiverts, which they can be either or, and usually the temperament that does that for the most part is the phlegmatic temperament. They can be quiet and they could also be very outgoing in that sense. If you struggle with this, this is something that I know can show in different ways, which is why some people may struggle with rejection and not even know it. And the way we know that we struggle with rejection is because we compensate. And part of the ways that I would compensate, if I can get a little personal with you and vulnerable, is that when I felt a threat, any type of threat, whether it was not being liked, whether it was someone saying something that would directly make me feel less than, or that I didn't have what it took, I would overcompensate by performance. For those of you that don't know me on a more personal standpoint, I'm a musician, I'm a singer, speaker, preacher for those that are in the church realm, but I am also a public speaker. I've been speaking from a public standpoint as far as a platform for many years, part of the National Speakers Association. And as a certified life coach, I did trainings and workshops, and I would move around and travel throughout the country and even internationally. My wife and I had the privilege to go out to St. Thomas for the U.S. Department of Human Services, and I did a workshop out there, did some workshops in California, Arizona, just all over the place, Jamaica. And so the point is, I had a gift, and I still do. I don't do it as much, but I don't want to sound like I retired. But it was something that I did, even though I was gifted, but I did it for the wrong reasons at times. Now, mind you, There were times where obviously I was excited about the opportunity because it gave me a platform to empower people, to train people, to help people navigate their different work areas. And I love that. I still love that, which is why I do a podcast and I write books. Now, the issue was that the driving force behind a lot of the things that I said yes to were for the wrong reasons. And it was to overcompensate, because anything that I felt was a form of rejection, I felt less than, I felt worthless, I felt like I had to do something. And so I would say yes, I would say yes, I would say yes. And I would also share on social media where I was, what I was doing, and the people that liked and commented and shared were validating my worth in what I was doing. Now, let me make sure that I clarify what I'm trying to say. I am not saying that if you post pictures, videos, status updates about what you're doing, if you're traveling, if you're doing work stuff and you're performing, if you're an athlete and you score a set amount of points, if you're a speaker and you're speaking in front of many hundreds or thousands of people, I'm not saying that that's wrong in and of itself. What I am saying is that we have to check our motivation behind what we're doing. Because if we are honest, many times, I'm not saying a few, many times, we are doing things to compensate for the things that we lack in our emotional intelligence, in our sense of self-worth, in our lack of worth, etc. We just have to know to ask ourselves these questions so that we keep ourselves honest. That is all I'm trying to say. And in my case, many of the times that I was doing the things that I was doing, I was trying to compensate for a lack of sense of worth. And that was no one's fault. It was something that I developed because of this topic, rejection. In my practice, I share a lot of my personal testimony and struggles and stories with individuals when it comes to this topic, because I think it's important that people can connect with our stories. And they could only connect with our stories if we share them. And a lot of my rejection is tied to my relationship with my dad, and how my dad at times just was not present. He was in the home, married to my mom, still is, but emotionally absent, sometimes physically absent, and many times mentally disconnected. And so that, as well as many specific stories that I've shared in other books that I've written, that presented itself to be a source of rejection for me. Now, fast forward, I have been able to embrace my acceptance because of who I am in Jesus Christ. I am a Christian. I profess faith in the Lord, and also salvation in Jesus Christ. And so I know that my worth and my value comes through what He did for me when He died on the cross. He said, "It is finished." There's nothing I need to do to earn it. There's nothing that I can do to lose it. This is all a completed work that I have to now enjoy and walk and navigate and journey in this life that I have here. So that has changed the narrative as far as how I handle rejection. So any rejection that I have to deal with now, I have to remind myself of who I am in Christ, and remind myself that these are just things that might try to get me to think about my worth. And once I'm reminded of who I am in Christ, then it's just squashed and it's dealt with. But I know that there are many of you that are listening that still struggle with this to a degree where it has developed in you ways of compensating. And maybe it's not performance, maybe it's promiscuity, maybe it's substance abuse, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's codependency, trying to please everybody, trying to be there and be the rescuer and the savior. There's so many different ways that we can compensate. Just know that this book and this podcast is here to support and help you not only overcome it, but also identify so that you know where it's connected, potentially where it's connected, and how you can cut it and get rid of it once and for all. So I want to read to you a quote from the book directly, and then I'm going to share with you a few things, a few tips that we can probably put into practice right away. Okay? So here is a quote from the chapter that I discuss, how do we overcome rejection, specifically the types of rejection, etc. And this is page 30, confronting the pain of rejection. That's really what I wanted to talk about. This is what I write. Not everyone deals with rejection in the same way. Studies show that people with a higher sense of self-esteem, as well as people with more social power, handle rejection better than those with lower self-esteem and less social influence. There are salespeople who love cold calling and think that every no brings them closer to the next yes. So there's a natural optimism as far as looking at rejection to push them to an acceptance, if you will. Now, rejection is going to happen. It is a fact of life that not all relationships and situations will work out well. From a distance, we can often see that a rejection was a good thing for us, but at the time, it doesn't feel right. Developing more effective responses to rejection is an important life skill. Young people, please listen to this. If you can't deal with rejection, you may need to work on building your self-confidence and self-esteem and strengthening your social ties before addressing the anxiety, anger, and other issues that come from being rejected. This is so huge, and a lot of people will push back and say, I don't suffer from rejection. Yes, I'm on social media and I post and but I don't feel some type of way when somebody doesn't like my post, or I don't really care. And to be honest, a lot of people, they just are very dismissive when it comes to this area and this topic, because no one wants to admit so easily that they struggle with rejection, because it's a direct identification of self-worth or lack thereof, and people will see that as an indirect form of rejection because they have to put themselves out there and they have to be vulnerable. And when a person that struggles with rejection feels vulnerable, they believe in the lie and the false belief. They subscribe to the false belief that now everybody potentially is going to see them as weak, as less than, and so that's the ultimate rejection. Don't believe the hype. Don't fall for this lie. Just because you're vulnerable, just because you admit that you struggle at times with rejection, doesn't make you discarded, which is why I wrote the book. And in the book, just so you know, for those that are of Christian faith, I used the story of the young man Mephibosheth. He was the son of King Saul's son. So he was the grandson of King Saul, the son of Jonathan, who was a really good friend of David, who became king after Saul. And once Saul dies and when Saul dies and Jonathan die, and David becomes king, he made a covenant with Jonathan, and he wants to do right to anyone that is still living from the house of Jonathan. And one of his servants, he realizes, yes, there is a son. He is somewhere out there in a place called Lodabar, which was kind of like an isolated, very dry place. His name is Mephibosheth. And David said, well, go get him, because I got to do right by the covenant that I did with his father. And long story short, for those of you that don't know Bible story, this is a fascinating story. David is now the king. Mephibosheth was actually dropped when he was a baby by the nanny as they were running away from the bombings and well, they didn't have bombs back then, but the attack, there you go, the attack of the enemy. they were running, and she was running, and she dropped him, and he became an invalid. And because of the whole scenario, he was discarded. He was treated like trash, and he believed that he was trash. When David asked for him to come, and he pretty much makes him like a prince, one of his sons, Mephibosheth says, "Why are you treating me this way? I'm worse than a dead dog." That's the terminology he used. And David's like, you are the son of my best friend, and now you are almost like my son, and you will always eat at the king's palace. So it's just an interesting story. I highly recommend that you read it. 1 Samuel chapter 17, I believe it is. Mephibosheth. Anyway, also get the book. I talk about it, and I talk about rejection, and here are some tips, 5 tips that I want you to walk away with as it relates to how to overcome the pain that comes with rejection. Ready? Here we go. Number 1, healthy confidence in self. That is key. Obviously, this comes with practice. Some temperaments have this come more naturally than others, but you need to know your self-worth. And when you have self-worth, you have a healthy sense of confidence. Now, confidence is one of those words that's tricky, because when you are overconfident, then you become arrogant and egotistical, and that is an absolute no-no. But when you have a healthy sense of confidence, you know who you are, you know why you do what you do, you have a goal in mind as to why God created you and the purpose that you have in life. And so what people think, what people believe about you really doesn't faze you and doesn't bother you, because it does not determine your worth. So healthy self-confidence is key to overcoming the pain of rejection. Number 2, and I'm just reading from my book here, is change to a positive internal dialogue. Change to a positive internal dialogue. Obviously, anytime I talk about stuff that we say to ourselves, I have to reference my other book, I Said to Myself, False Beliefs That Won't Let Me Breathe. Why? Because obviously it's something that also played a huge role in my life, but it also makes sense as to when we deal with rejection and the pain that comes with rejection, we really have to make sure that we are telling ourselves the truth about who we are, and that it is positive in nature. Not to ignore the negative characteristics that we have, not to ignore the potential negative things that we do, but we need to be more focused on the potential positive things that we can offer, because that's what's going to develop in us this sense of higher serotonin, endorphins, these happy chemicals, these feel-good chemicals that will fight against any type of negative stress and or depression and things that weigh us down, that then gives us lack of motivation. We don't want that. That is a dead end in every aspect. We want to make sure that we're building ourselves up, and it starts with what we tell ourselves. So that is point number 2. Number 3, remember that this too shall pass. We are steps away from the spring season, and it's a bittersweet change for me, because I suffer from allergies, and so as everyone is enjoying the growth and the birth of the flowers, and the grass is growing and the trees are blossoming and all this, which I also enjoy as from a visual standpoint, I struggle with the different ragweeds and the pollen and just the environment as a whole. It really affects my sinuses and my throat and all of that good stuff. But it is a sense of new beginnings, and I do love that. And so remember, whatever you're going through, there's an expiration date on it. There's a season that you may be going through right now that is dry and is barren and is fruitless, but this too shall pass. This is not forever. So prepare yourself mentally, spiritually, and emotionally for the new season that's about to come, because that's how life works. So don't get stuck in the winter. Remember, spring is on its way, and it will bring forth new life. The things that you thought were probably dead, they were just being dormant for a little bit. All right, so remember, this too shall pass. Number 4, practice reframing. I'll read a little bit from my book again. Take a deep breath, walk away from the situation, and breathe for a few minutes. Many times the situation seems worse because you react and then frame it as something negative about yourself. Instead, take a physical step back and begin to breathe deeply. Choose to rephrase it. Instead of thinking, no one will ever love me, I'm not lovable, you could reframe it by thinking, relationships are hard for everyone. I'm no different. This was hard for me, but I can learn something from it. Let me concentrate on what I can learn. You have to reframe it. There's pictures behind me, and if you cover that, this side is purple, that side is reddish, but there's some different colors in the middle. So it depends on how you frame it. You see that? It's all how you reframe it. So please take the time to reframe your thinking, reframe the way you perceive the situation, so that you have a healthy outlook moving forward. And finally, number 5, how do we overcome the pain of rejection? You have to let it go. You have to be willing to say, this does not define me. This too shall pass. I'm not going to look at it and have my identity be connected to it. I need to let this go, and I need to move on. Real quick, from my book, it says it's okay to feel upset about rejection. After all, you're human and have emotional responses. Allow yourself to feel the pain, cry, hit a pillow, but then set a limit to how long you'll regret the rejection. Literally, set a time frame. I can mourn this until next Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. and then I'll call it quits. Let the emotions run through you, but don't let them park and become long-term visitors. I pray that that is a blessing to you, that helps you overcome the pain of rejection. There is real pain that comes with feeling not wanted or discarded or not worthy in people's eyes. There's real pain to that. So I don't want you to think that I'm dismissing that. I also want you to walk away with potential tools and skills that you can develop and use so that you can deal with the pain that comes with rejection, overcome it, and reframe your situation from a positive standpoint. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you have not subscribed, crush that button, like this video, let the algorithm know that we are overcoming rejection, that we are not settling for what people think or say that we are, and we are overcoming it. And please share it with your friends, with your family. Let us know how we can support you. And until then, mind yours, stay healthy, my friends.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast. For more information, visit our website at juangarciaenterprises.com. Our host, Juan Garcia, is available for speaking, coaching, and one-on-one counseling. You can email us at info@juangarciaenterprises.com. Until next time, remember, we only have one mind, so mind yours.